All right, so cricket is where we start off this Thursday edition of the SportsMax Zone. The Women's Caribbean Premier League got underway on Wednesday night with defending champions Barbados Royals taking on the Guyana Amazon Warriors. And it was an exciting encounter going down to the penultimate delivery, with the Royals winning by 1 wicket. Batting first, the Warriors were restricted to 118 for 9 of 20 overs, with Aliyah Alain taking 3 for 21 against Stefani Taylor's top score of 38. In reply, the Royals found themselves on 44 for 3 after 9 overs, but captain Hayley Matthews produced an unbeaten 61 to push them to 119 for 9 with 1 ball to spare. For South Africa's Shabnim Ismail was lethal, with the ball taking 4 for 16. Our international cricket commentator Nikhil Uttam-Chandani, he joins us this afternoon to review the match. Nikhil, I have to say, this was exactly what the women's CPL needed as an opening match, a rematch of the final, and it had everything in it, as I said at the top of the show.
Yeah, Maria, really exciting. I think, as you said, the perfect way you would want to start any competition, and to go to the second last delivery, I thought that in itself was fantastic. And I thought also, while there is still some room for improvement in terms of our cricket and the quality of the league, I thought the way that, you saw a few young stars begin to shine, it was really impressive. And I hope that we can continue to grow in confidence going deeper into the competition.
Yeah, and as you speak about young stars, Nia Lachman, she bowled that last over. And I found that personally to be a really brave decision based on how the odds were set up between both teams, because there were moments, we felt as if Guyana Amazon Warriors were pulling back the game in their favor, and then it went back to be like 5 required from 5 balls. And then the captain, the international captain, she decides to give the ball to young Nia Lachman. And of course, everybody who was supporting Guyana Amazon Warriors at that point in time would have been their nerves would have been acting up. Well, I can speak for myself personally. And then she comes out there and she delivers. I felt as if the captain did a great job in selecting her after, of course, the fact.
Yeah, I think in terms of Nia Lachman, Maria, 19 years old, first T20, professional T20 that is. She's had a season with Guyana, just the 1 game for the West Indies A. I couldn't believe sort of the maturity and how comfortable she looked in a game like this. To bowl the last over against Hayley Matthews. And you look before that last over, she bowled 12 balls to Hayley Matthews in the game last night, and she only went for 10 runs and did not concede a single boundary. And for me, I think that is massively impressive. We saw how well Hayley batted last night, and just her control, Lachman, that is. I thought for 19 years old and in your very first game, she was superb. So, and this is, I think, the whole point of the WCPL and the reason why we want to have this tournament being expanded to more teams and more players, because around the world, it's the franchise leagues that has helped breed that sort of new talent for the international sides. And we know that there's an Under-19 World Cup now. So I think last night was a great highlight and glimpse into hopefully what we can expect to come in this tournament, where you're starting to see young stars emerge. But we know how well Afi Fletcher's done over the years for the West Indies. She still continues to have a career year when you think about the recent Sri Lanka series. But it's good to have that competition for places in the side. And Australia do it and have 2 leg spinners in their team. Who's to say the West Indies can't? So I love the effort from Lachman, and she's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, and I think, we really have to mention the contributions of the international players, because they also add to the flavor of this competition. Erin Burns taking that catch, a brilliant catch, I still can't get over that moment. It was a top-class one. Then, of course, we had other international players like Shabnim Ismail, who just got back from the 100 tournament in London. She was also brilliant with the ball, picking up 4 wickets, and it's as if every time she comes out to bowl, she has this sort of confidence, this sort of class, and I can't help but, think how much it must benefit our young players and our local players as well.
Yeah, that for me is the key. Your last statement there, Maria. Obviously, I think Ishmael, and even I would say Jade Wellington, I'll put both of those in a world-class bracket. When you look at what they've achieved in world cricket, probably throughout the last 24 months. But the main thing for me, and I just watched how the West Indian batters specifically played the 2 of them, And you look at the inability to score against more than half of the deliveries bowled by those two bowlers. And you could see that the step up in quality in terms of the bowling by Jade Wellington and Ishmael, and our batters struggle to adjust. And I think that is the biggest benefit of having them in this competition, where you get more experience facing world-class bowling and bowling that is very similar to what you would face at the international level. So, again, room for improvement. In terms of just trying to score against more delivery, it's been the problem for the last 2 seasons. And even last night, I think you had 55 and 58 dot balls by each team. So that is the key. How can we score off more deliveries and also capitalize on promising positions? Because both teams were in a really good position last night, come the 15th over, and then lost 5 or more wickets in the last 5 overs. So I think whilst we've seen some really good positives, there is still room for improvement, and I think it's surrounding our batting.
Yeah, one quick one, Nikhil. I'd put this to Anisa Mohammed when we spoke with her yesterday ahead of the start of the tournament regarding the surface in Tarouba. Remember, the ICC had graded the Tarouba surface unsatisfactory for the World Cup semi-final. And I just wanted to get your insight into how it played last night, especially in comparison to what we saw during the World Cup.
Well, I think it was a lot harder, which was a good sign. But there is a bit of grass growing in patches, as we saw, mainly on the sides of the surface. And I thought at times you had that variable bounce, which was hard to sort of mitigate. A lot of deliveries against, I think, the seamers especially. So Aliyah Aline, for example, bowling from around the wicket, she was special as well with ball in hand. But there were a few deliveries there where it just sort of took off a length. But definitely it looked, I heard Ian Bishop do the pitch report, and he said it's one of the hardest surfaces he's seen at the Bareilles Cricket Academy. So I think from that perspective, it's good to see that they've been able to rectify some of those issues. I would like to see how it plays tonight and then tomorrow, where the West Indies, of course, play South Africa at this stadium as well. But I do like that there's emphasis on growing green grass. I think across the Caribbean, we need to have that green grass on the surfaces a lot more. I think it's going to help our cricket and just help the quality of cricket as well.
Yeah, Nikhil, now that you mentioned it, let's just turn our attention to the West Indies men who are going to be in action, as you pointed out, against South Africa, the first of 3 T20 internationals. Start on Friday, of course. Rodman Powell will lead the West Indies side. That will be without Andre Russell, Azari Joseph and Jason Holder. All 3 have been rested for the series. Just a quick look at the full West Indies squad. So there you have it. Powell as captain, Roston Chase as vice-captain, Fabian Allen gets back into the side. He did play against South Africa in the build-up to the World Cup, that 3-match series that the West Indies won. Alec Athanaze, Johnson Charles, Matthew Ford, Shimron Hetmeyer retains his place in the squad, although he didn't play at the World Cup. Sheikh Hope, Akil Hussain, Shamar Joseph, Obed McCoy, Gudakesh Moti continues to be a fine all-format player. Nicholas Puran, Sherfin Rutherford and Romario Shepherd, the West Indies squad, going into that 3-match T20 international series. Nikhil, the expectations going into this one?
I think looking to see if there can be an improvement in the areas that they've struggled in. So we know the bowling in the last 5 overs has been a problem. I still think the rotation of strike against spin and being able to score off more deliveries against spin needs to be improved. And also I'm looking to see how they fit the likes of Athanaze and Matthew Ford, even a Shamar Joseph, 3 young pieces who clearly Darren Sammy likes. Athanaze and Ford both have made their one-day international debuts under Sammy. I think it was a big call to include someone like Athanaze over Kyle Mayers. But they've obviously got one eye on that T20 World Cup, which will be at the beginning of 2026. And whether they bat Athanaze at the top of the order, whether he bats at 4 where he bats for the Barbados Royals, it will be interesting. But I'm looking to see how they start building and what can they improve on in this series going forward so that we can win the World Cup. He said, Sammy, that was in the press conference yesterday, he wants to be a championship-winning team, not a series-winning team, which we have been for the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned the head coach, Darren Sammy. Let's now hear, Nikhil, from the skipper, Rodman Powell.
It's the first series post-World Cup, you know, so it's an important one in the sense that we have to get back on track as a T20 team, and I think so far, so good.
Yeah, he speaks about, of course, getting back on track. That will require different pieces of the puzzle, you know, really coming together. One of the things, Nikhil, we've always spoken about on this show is that word consistency. You know, different aspects of the game clicking at the same time and everybody coming together. And one such player that I think would have a key role to play would be Obed McCoy, because we've seen glimpses of hope from him. You know, we've seen some bright sparks. What do you think his role will be as, he gets ready for this T20? And how important is it that, he has a good showing?
I think he's one of the most important pieces going into the 2026 World Cup, Maria. He's 27 years old. We've seen, as you mentioned, in 2021, Obed McCoy, in my opinion, was one of the best death bowlers in the world, and the numbers back it up. But since then, he's had consistent injuries. He's spent a lot of time off the field. And I think the paramount interest for West Indies cricket has to be to get Obed McCoy on the field consistently. He offers a left-arm seam variation. He has the back of the hand throw ball. I feel like I've been saying this for months, but he has to sort of live up to this potential now. I expect him to have a big CPL if he can stay fit, because he struggled last year, especially at the back end of the innings. But we are lacking a consistent death bowling option pretty much since Dwayne Bravo retired. And it's an opportunity for not only Obed McCoy, but I'll also say Shamar Joseph, Matthew Ford, younger bowlers, to realize that there's an opportunity at stake here. You can prove it in this series, and even the other seamers in the CPL. I think there's a huge space in that team up for grabs. And even a Romario Shepherd, who has struggled at the back end, can now try to really come in and execute their skills against a South Africa batting lineup that I think lacks some experience.
Yeah, well, what you've just said, Nikhil, is more of a hopeful outlook on what is happening, that these players can grasp the opportunity, because as you had said at the top, the experience of Alzarri Joseph and Jason Holder, along with Andre Russell, who is missing this series, they won't be playing in this series as faster bowlers. So Romario Shepherd ends up now being one of the more experienced bowlers in this setup, and he will have to lead Shamar Joseph and Obed McCoy, among the others, and Matthew Ford, as you just mentioned. So from the standpoint of the quality, do you think these players have the quality? Yes, they may be lacking in the experience, but do they have the quality to fill the shoes that you speak of?
Definitely, Lance. And I think you look at them in isolation. Someone like a Shamar Joseph, what he's achieved in T20 cricket in very small doses, obviously very inexperienced still, but I think back to Kingston before the World Cup and what he was able to do in a few spells with the brand new ball, with that extra pace option. I think he has a lot to learn in the format, but he's shown enough skill, in my opinion, that he can sort of adapt and become a three-phase bowler, whereas probably now he's only suited with that new ball and the bit of swing he can get. Matthew Ford in a similar boat. But what Matthew Ford and I'm believing in is the ability that he's had and displayed in the CPL seasons for the last 2 or 3 years. He's looked like he's had a different confidence when he's played for the St. Lucia Kings, and he's been one of their best bowlers alongside Alzarri Joseph. So I know he's been working very hard on his back-end bowling and his variations. He had a bigger role to play when the West Indies went to Nepal earlier this year. But again, I think when it comes to skill, there's no question about it. It's just about execution. And now realizing that this is a different level, because CPL is one beast, but international cricket against some of the best in the world will be a whole other challenge. And the West Indies death bowling especially, I think Andre Russell not being there, he's been our best death bowler since the England series last year. So it will identify even a bigger gap or a bigger space that needs to be filled in this series. And I hope that the West Indies can realize that. I hope others on the fringes can realize, watching around the region, and understand how big of an opportunity they have to sort of break into this team and be at that World Cup in a year or so's time.
Yeah, Nicholas Pooran has had a bumper year so far. So as we switch over to the batting prospects for this team, Brandon King, who has been pretty important to the T20 batting lineup, missing because of an injury. How do you feel this batting lineup stacks up against the South Africans?
I think 3 to 6, very solid. I don't see much changes happening in terms of Pooran, in terms of Roston Chase, who I think has become so valuable for the West Indies in the different roles he can play. Obviously, Rutherford, Robin Powell, I expect them to be in that top order as well. So I don't understand how someone like a Shimmer Hetmeyer gets into the 11. There have been people around the region actually saying, he should be tried at the opening position, which I find, obviously it's a left field option, but it might be worth the discussion. I'm not confident in the amount of deliveries he's batted in the last 5 overs in probably the last 4 or 5 years, because he's become such a finisher now. I think it's almost forced him into that finishing role in whichever team he plays in. But what I'm interested in seeing is probably the top 2. So who do they open with? Do they go back to Johnson Charles, who's 35 years old, alongside Shea Hope, who opened at the World Cup, now that you don't have a Brandon King or you don't have a Kyle Mears? Or do they go with the youth in Athenaeus? But I like the continuity that they've found and how they've complemented each other in positions 3 to 6. So I expect them to be a force to be reckoned with.
All right, Nikhil. Well, we're excited for this T20 matchup. It will be played in Trinidad and Tobago at Taruba. I love the idea of the double header. And I think, it's a step in the right direction when it comes to getting more people to come out and support the women. Yesterday we had Anissa on the show and, she's happy as well. But, only time will tell if that is a success. How do you feel about them having the men and the women's matches together? 2 for 1.
Great. Yeah, great initiative, Maria. I think obviously having the men's first, you hope that people will stay on after the game and watch the women's as well. And I think last night's game, and many people weren't there, but they were a lot watching on television, and you could see on social media the reactions, etc. So I hope that has sort of served as a flyer into what you can expect, into the excitement. But it's imperative that this tournament is a success, the women's CPL, because it really trickles down. There's a World Cup coming up for the women at the end of the year. We've got some new players in. I think it's so important to get that West Indian support, whether you're around the region or here in Trinidad. And Maria, we need you to call your family, your friends, because you are Trini, and tell them to come to the games.
No, they've been there. Listen, at the start of the CPL match, I saw my aunt and my little cousins, everybody out in their colors and numbers. So I don't know if you want me to get some extra family, but all that I have, they were there to support.
What colours and numbers? What colours and numbers,
Well, they're supporting the Ramharak, so they were out in their green supporting. And Nikhil, I saw them like a couple of times, all of my grandmother and things. So if you have any family, you bring them, Nikhil.
Well, I know Ricardo has family in Trinidad, so he can definitely send some of those at the ground.
And he has a lot of friends, too, that he talks to all the time. Did you tell your Trini friends to go out, Ricardo?
Isn't it break time?
He's running away, Nikhil, as he usually does. But the
usual proceedings.
Yeah, the producer was giving him a minute though to justify, but we'll save him for today. Nikhil, thank you so much for stopping by on the SportsMax Zone. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk again soon.
Hopefully. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Nikhil Uttam Chandani there. You got saved today, Ricardo. Doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow.
Break time.
Break time.